Naturalism, that is the theory that everything came about naturally through the Big Bang and abiogenesis and evolution, has now been disproved. In the future, historians are going to look back and say it was in 2024 that naturalism collapsed.
Welcome to the Creation Today Show, where we bring together interviews with experts and solid Bible teaching. Your host, Eric Hovind, affirms the ultimate authority of God's Word, the truth of creation, and why it matters to you.
Naturalism is the philosophical view that everything arises from natural causes and laws. There's no need for a supernatural explanation. Now, while this idea has its roots all the way back in ancient Greece, I mean, we're talking like 6th century before Christ, okay? It was developed further by Aristotle in the 4th century BC. The Greeks kind of started it. 4th century BC, Aristotle comes along and says, I'm going to hold to the prime mover idea, but really introduced and helped develop the idea of naturalism. And then it really kicked off, rejecting the idea of a prime mover or a god who started everything in the 3rd century BC with the Epicureans. They decided that all existence could be explained without any divine intervention. Now, throughout the Middle Ages, naturalism was forced to take a back seat because some brilliant philosophers came about and they showed the role of God, the creator, in his creation. Guys like Aquinas and Augustine and several others. But then, in the 17th and 18th century, the age of enlightenment, the scientific revolution, created fertile soil for the reemergence of naturalism. And with people like Hume, the idea of empirical science started to reign supreme, and there was no longer in their mind a need for the creator God, the prime mover. Naturalism had made a comeback. This is what led to the work of guys like James Hutton, who developed the old earth thinking ideas. And that gave rise to Charles Darwin, to whom we give really undue credit for the theory of evolution. So the question is, where are we at today? Well, you, my friend, are going to love what has happened in science over the last 150 years. To help catch us up to speed, I am joined by my friend, Dr. Carl Werner. He spent 27 years doing undercover investigation into modern scientists and their claims about what they had discovered. His investigation has led him to expose more than 150 frauds that have not only made it into the peer-reviewed papers, but have found themselves into the displays of every major museum worldwide. He created a full 8-part documentary series and wrote an extensive 5-volume set on his findings. And these frauds are absolutely being exposed to the world. And it's sending shockwaves, honestly, through the scientific community and through the world. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get up to speed on naturalism and see how it has collapsed under modern science. Please help me welcome Dr. Carl Werner. Dr. Werner, welcome back to the Creation Today Show, sir.
Oh, it's great to be here, and what a historic event that we're having today. It's just so exciting to be alive today.
Tell us what's going on.
Well, first of all, I want to say to the audience that everybody needs to bookmark this show and share it with their friends, because naturalism, that is the theory that everything came about naturally through the Big Bang and abiogenesis and evolution, has now been disproved. In the future, historians are going to look back and say it was in 2024 that naturalism collapsed. Today, I'm going to demonstrate this with undeniable detailed references and facts. Now, don't expect the evolutionists to change their mind after watching this show. The famous German physicist Max Planck, who was the winner of the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1918, said that science advances one funeral at a time. He wrote, "A new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die and a new generation grows up. But those in the audience who are open-minded likely will be convinced today that naturalism has failed." Now let's get started with this first slide the first step of naturalism is that the universe formed naturally without God through the interaction of just atoms, hydrogen and helium, and energy. And the most accepted theory of how this happened is the Big Bang Theory. But in 2003, the Big Bang was disproved.
I love the fact that you're going to use, and this is what you did last time when we did the breaking news. You're not just saying, well, here's what a creation scientist says. You're going to the secular scientists and showing inside their own worldview, they've debunked their own theories.
That's right. These are secular scientists, like this Professor Green is a professor of physics at an Ivy League school, Columbia University. And he appeared in this show called The Elegant Universe. It was a PBS show, Nova Television miniseries. And he says this: there's always been a couple problems with the Big Bang Theory. Our laws of physics simply break down. They don't make any sense in the Big Bang Theory. Now, that's not a very, great endorsement about the theory. The Nobel Prize winner for physics in 2004 was this man, Dr. David Gross. Now, again, he's a secularist. He's at the University of California. He says this on the show: the physics formulas we use in the Big Bang Theory give answers that are nonsensical. We find total disaster. Everything breaks down and we're stuck. And on the same show, this professor from the University of Pennsylvania, he's also a professor of physics and astronomy, said this: do I really believe that the universe was a Big Bang out of nothing? He says it's also a problem. What he was referring to, Eric, was this law of physics, which everyone accepts, called the law of conservation of matter and energy, that says that matter and energy cannot be created from nothing. In other words, you can't go from nothing to matter, hydrogen or helium, or nothing to energy. So how would you even get the universe started to even bang, So, so that was that show. But the following year, an article appeared in New Scientist, and there were 30 scientists that signed this article, and I'm going to show you who they were. But I'm going to read you the first paragraph. It's just a little bit long, about 4 sentences. Let me just read it, because I want you to hear their words. These are secularists. Quote, the Big Bang today relies on a growing number of hypothetical entities, things that we have never observed, such as inflation, dark matter, and dark energy. They're the most prominent examples. Without them, there would be a fatal contradiction between the observations made by astronomers and the predictions of the Big Bang Theory. In other fields of physics, in no other field of physics would this continual recourse to new hypothetical objects be accepted as a way to bridging the gap between theory and observation. It would, at the least, raise serious questions about the validity of the underlying theory. But the Big Bang Theory can't survive without these fudge factors. Well, who wrote this? These physicists. Wow. This one from the University of Cambridge. The second one is from Los Alamos National Laboratory. Third one is from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. The next one is from Max Planck Institute for Astrophysics. And I'm not going to read through them, but these are some big institutions. They are the top institutions. They're all secular. And they basically said that the Big Bang Theory doesn't work. Let's get over it. We don't have a theory that works. And let's start looking for other ideas of how the universe formed. 30 signatories to this article in New Scientist. So just an objective person would listen to this and say, okay, we do not have a description or a way to form the universe naturally. Let's move on to the next bullet point here. And
let me, before you do, I got to say, that's powerful for them to say fudge factors, for them to use language that is totally against science. That's powerful. I was recently listening to Piers Morgan interviewed Richard Dawkins and held his feet to the fire, saying it's so counterintuitive to not be able to ask the question, what was before the Big Bang? And Richard Dawkins is like, well, you're not allowed to ask that question. It's a nonsensical question. And Piers is like, well, hang on. I do. You want to ask that question, don't you? And Richard's like, I got to trust the physicist. No, of course I don't understand it. I got to trust the physicist.
You cannot use the word before for the Big Bang. Time began at the Big Bang. There was no before the Big Bang. I know it's contrary to common sense. Physicists don't necessarily deal with common sense.
Well, it makes no sense, does it? And that's what I mean. I think you're a logical man. That cannot make sense to you. The idea that you're not even allowed to use the word before the Big Bang, when every part of both of our brains tells us that that's obviously nonsensical, doesn't that make you think again?
We are not physicists. I, like you, am completely baffled by what physicists say to me, which is that you cannot use the word before for before the Big Bang. Time itself began at the Big Bang. Now that is totally counterintuitive. It's counterintuitive to me, it's counterintuitive to you, it's counterintuitive to Stephen Meyer, but we are not physicists. And you need to talk to a physicist. Talk to a physicist about that.
Sounds like he's trusting select physicists instead of really looking at it objectively and saying what is true here.
No, because the physicists will tell you you can't create matter from nothing. And that's why Dawkins is stuck. And that's why all these scientists are stuck. There is no explanation for the universe forming other than saying God made it. There's no natural explanation, period. I'd like to go on to the next step in naturalism.
Yeah, hit us so according to naturalism, there is no God. First step, you have to get a universe to exist. They can't get that according to science. And that's been disproven many, many times. Oh, I should mention real quick, I did a whole show on, is the universe eternal? Because that was how they tried to fix that problem. I don't have time to go into that, but it's not eternal and cannot be. You can check out that show if you want more information on that. All right, what's point number 2 here?
Well,
we can't get the universe.
You can't get the universe. Now we have to go to how do you form life? Now, these dates I throw out throughout the show, I'm just using their dates. I don't believe any of these dates, but according to evolution scientists, the Earth formed 4.5 billion years ago, and it was lifeless. There was nothing living. It was just rocks and dust, almost like the surface of the moon. There was no living things. And somehow they have to go from that, no living things, to the first living thing, which I made this diagrammatic picture of a bacteria. Now, that would be the simplest form of a living being. Now, a bacteria is very similar to all animal and plant cells today. All animals, all plants, and bacteria have these 5 necessary components, Eric. They all have DNA, they all have RNA, proteins, enzymes, and cell membranes with proteins embedded to act as the channels to let things in and out. There's no exception. Every animal, every plant, every bacteria has these 5 components. And yet, this has been a secret, these components, enzymes, RNA, DNA, proteins, and cell membranes, will never, ever form from chemicals. You can mix any chemicals, dust, rocks, water, methane gas, electrify it, acidify it, shake it up, bake it, electrify it, put it on a volcano, whatever you're going to say how life began. And you can never form the first components, the necessary components, not even the first life. You can't even get the components. And this has been known for 50 years, but the evolution community has kept this from the community at large, that there's no way to form DNA from just chemicals. So an objective person would say the second step of naturalism is over. There is no explanation how life could ever begin. None.
And this is interesting because what you'll hear the evolutionists do is just push it off. Oh, well, evolution doesn't really deal with that. Evolution is a product of naturalism. Evolution is a product of the universe came about by itself, life evolved by itself. Now let's deal with how life evolved. So I know you're going to get into that, but oh my goodness, you can't even get there. You can't get to evolution without naturalism. And naturalism can't get started because you don't have Big Bang creating everything, and you
That's
can't
right.
get life from non-life. Absolutely impossible.
That's exactly right. It's a lame excuse on both Dawkins' point and for the evolutionists to say, well, it's not our problem to worry about how life began. We just start with life. That's very lame. This is
Yes.
lame. And you can see now, in retrospect, why this thing is such an easy thing to collapse. No, let's go on to the next one. Now, I talked about the first bacteria forming. Now, you see in the center of my diagram here, there is that little bacteria that I put in the center. Do you see that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so this bacteria that formed, which we don't know how it could ever form in the first place, but the evolution scientists would say that the bacteria that formed from the chemicals, which doesn't work, evolved into the 7 animal groups like corals, sponges, vertebrates, worms, the 7 animal groups. And this occurred in the lowest layer. So in the lowest layer of the rocks, like imagine going to the Grand Canyon, go to the bottom layer, you have bacteria. And then if you go to the very bottom layer of all the layers, you would find these animals. But there's no connection, there's no evolution between the bacteria and these animals. In fact, I got to remind you that bacteria is so small, you would need to magnify it 10,000 times under a microscope. So I'm going to shrink it. That's the animal we're going to evolve into this fish. Now, this fish was found in the Lower Cambrian. That one's reported in Nature, 1999. This is a fish. It has eyes, it has gills, it has vertebrae, it has this dorsal fin, it has a mouth and anus and intestinal tract, it has a heart, blood vessels. It is a full-fledged animal, but there is 0 animals on the evolutionary line between this microscopic bacteria and the fish. You would think there would be 100 or 10,000 intermediates between a bacteria and the fish, but there are none. And the same with the coral. You would think there'd be thousands of intermediate steps to go from this bacteria you can't even see to this 1.5 foot tall coral that's in the lowest layer. Now, I took these photographs and they're from the lowest layer, and there's no intermediates, Eric. This is like the biggest proof against evolution you'd ever see once you understand this. The evolutionists have a name for this chart. They call it the Cambrian explosion. They say, oh, life just kind of exploded. We don't know how it happened so fastly. Maybe the fossil record was poor. Maybe these were soft-bodied animals in the in-between animals. But that's bull. And I want to show you why that is baloney.
Now, if I'm correct on this, Dr. Werner, if I'm correct on this, even today, we see the single-celled organisms and we see the billions of celled organisms. We don't find the 2-celled. There's no 3-celled. There's no 4-celled. It's not like this thing went, oh, let me split and, oh, let me get along with somebody else. It's like there is 0, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 1 or lots and lots of cells. Yes. Those are your options.
Yes, those are your options. And we are looking to prove naturalism for the fossils, for the intermediates, and they're not there. Now, you can't say, and this is what they've said for 50 years, but in my book, Evolution, a Grand Experiment, we showed there have been 1 billion fossils have been collected. Now that's billion. That's a lot of fossils in the museums. And the fossils include bacteria. This is fossil bacteria, Eric. And this is fish eggs. Now imagine how hard it would be to fossilize a soft fish egg, but yet we have fossils of fish eggs.
Take caviar and turn that into a fossil. Whoa.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Fossil caviar. There you go. And here's animal embryos. This is microscopic. This is 1 cell, 2 cell, 4 cell, 8 cell of an animal embryo reproducing. They're fossils. Okay. So if you can get all these soft-bodied creatures from the smallest bacteria all the way up to a jellyfish, all fossilized, wouldn't you think, this is a worm, wouldn't you think that you would be able to easily find all the intermediate animals? Here's a flower petal. Think how soft that is. Wouldn't you think that you'd be able to find all the animals on each of these lines and that we'd all be talking about that every day? And you'd go into every museum you go into, you say, oh, let's follow the 5,000 intermediates between the bacteria and the sponge. Let's just follow this whole hallway and we'll follow them in steps. There is nothing. That is the end of this theory that the bacteria gave rise to the 7 animal groups. It's a crazy thing that we have allowed the evolutionists to hoodwink us with, always reverting to that the fossil record is poor. It's not poor. It is 1 billion fossils. 90% of the animals that are living today, you can find in the fossil record. 90%. That's how good the fossil record is. So you should be able to find 90% of these intermediates to get to the 7 animal groups. They don't exist. The only logical thing to conclude is that this never happened. And this is the first 3 buttons here on this chart. It's destroyed the theory of evolution. I really don't need to go on, but I do need to go on because there's going to be a lot of naysayers out there, and I'm going to destroy this thing in the next 15 minutes.
This is almost, it's more than comical. This is Babylon Bee material. The real evidence for evolution is lines and artwork. That's it. They draw something that looks intermediate, and then they draw a line that says this connects to this. That's their proof. It's not found in science. It's not found in nature. It's not found in naturalism. It's an artistic drawing and a line, sometimes with an arrow saying this to this. That's all they got.
And we trusted them. What a fool. What fools we were. We trusted them because they're scientists. I'll tell you what, the evolutionists are not scientists. They are atheists who became science people. They're atheists who became science people. They're not scientists. A scientist would look at this and say, this is crazy. Let's abandon this theory. No, this is atheism 101. And we were fools for accepting this. I need to move on.
You just made a powerful point, Dr. Werner. It's not science to atheism. It's atheism first that leads to how I do my science.
Exactly.
That's the reality.
Exactly. If you're an atheist, you're going to try to find an ape man, and even if it turns out to be a pig's tooth, you know?
Yeah. Neanderthal man. Oh, thank you for exposing, by the way, all those frauds. By the way, social media, I didn't get to welcome you guys yet. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us, and television audience and podcast audience. I'm telling you, this is so good. And if you have not already, you've got to get Dr. Werner's DVD series, or you can get them on digital or DVD, and his book series. They are absolutely incredible. We did a whole show on that. It's on the screen. It's incredible. You got to go check that out because he exposes all of these details that we're not going into in detail and shows what a fraud they are. So really appreciate that's a lot of work you've done on this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm not going to mention that my bibliography is 432 pages long, but I won't mention that.
Just the bibliography. Wow.
I won't mention that.
I got a couple minutes before I have to let social media go. Let's try to get through at least 1, maybe 2 more of these points that is destroying and collapsing naturalism. And then I'll have to take it over to just our partners. Let's see if we can get through 1 or 2 more.
I just want to tell the audience, if you don't watch the full show, you need to sign up for whatever it takes to see the full show because this is historic. You need to see this, and it gets worse. It's just getting worse each step here. Okay, so you remember the origin of animals. That was the first 7 animals, the 7 animal groups. Now we're going to drill down on one of the groups. I'm just picked vertebrates. Like, remember the bacteria is supposed to become a fish, a vertebrate? So now a fish then supposedly gave rise to other fish, and this fish then became an amphibian, which became a reptile, which became a mammal. So I'm going to drill down that line, and I want to show you why it doesn't work, not just forming the 7 groups, but up the line. It's crazy. Watch this. There have been 500,000 fish collected by museums. And these are extraordinary fossils. They're always nearly perfect. And these are our photographs from the museums, okay? 500,000 fish, that's a heck of a fossil record. Well, you had that first fish. You would expect that first fish, which I placed here in the gray, I don't know if you can see the gray fish in the middle.
I can.
That was that first fish. It is supposed to now give rise to the sharks, the lampreys, the ratfish, the coelacanth, the bony fish, etc. But this chart shows that there is no connection between that first fish and these other fish. See, this chart shows you where fossils are missing, but with dots. When they have dots, that means there's no fossils. There's no fossils showing that first fish from the Cambrian connecting to sharks. How do you get a shark from that first fish? We don't know. How do you get to a lamprey from that first fish? We don't know. How do you get to a coelacanth from that first fish? We don't know. You got 500,000 fish and you don't know how all these things are connected. Well, we got lots of coelacanths. We have lots of shark fossils. We have tons of lungfish fossils, but we have no fossils between the first fish and the other fish groups. They just suddenly appear. And who's saying this? Not Carl Werner. It's this man who is a fish evolution expert at the Museum Victoria, and he's in the video series that you have on your website. Oh my gosh. This is crazy, but this is just one. Now we're going to do another one.
Hey, guy, real quick. Why does he say, how do they claim it's the first fish fossil? Is it because it's the lowest? And then
lowest.
So
Lowest.
They're using the circular reasoning there. Again, we're saying, because this layer is this old, therefore this fish is this old. And then because this fish is this old, this layer is this old. So they're doing the same old circular reasoning argument there.
Yeah, creationists would say all those layers were laid down in a flood. They don't have anything to do with dates. But we're just going to go with their line of reasoning to tear their line of reasoning down, okay? So it's the lowest layer. That fish was in the lower Cambrian. That's a problem, because you should not have a full-blown fish, right? Boom, okay? That's very much of a problem. So the fish groups show up. Then the next one, the dinosaurs. Okay, they found 100,000 dinosaurs. 3,000 of them are articulated skeletons. Not fully articulated, but there's a buttload of dinosaurs, okay? You get it? And these numbers and these interviews are in my book, The Grand Experiment. What does Dr. Dave Weishaupt, who wrote the Bible on dinosaur evolution, say? We have 100,000 dinosaurs, but we have no, this is his words, no ancestors to any dinosaur species. Each dinosaur species is not connected with fossils. The fossils do not connect one dinosaur to another. They just suddenly appear, just like the fish, just like the 7 animal groups. That is not evolution. And any objective person would look at this and just scratch their head and say, why do we believe this? Here's bats. I'm just going up the vertebrates, This is now a mammal. Now it's going to go a land mammal to a flying mammal, okay? So look at these pictures that Debbie took. Debbie is my wife. These are fossil bat. We have 1,000 fossil bats. And look how extraordinary. You can see what they ate for lunch. You can see their wing membrane. You can see their ears up there on the top right. 1,000 fossil bats. With that many fossil bats, you would expect to be able to see the land animal. They call it now, today it's called a tree shrew, is going to evolve into a bat, but next week it'll be a different animal. Okay, tree shrew is evolving into a bat. Okay, we got fossil tree shrews, we got fossil bats. We should expect animals A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H over these millions of years of this animal changing into this animal. Because the tree shrew wouldn't have babies and he looks at the babies and say, oh, we birthed a bat. No, it's over millions or tens of thousands of generations of a slow change. Like animal E should look like a tree shrew with very long arms, but there's no wing membranes. And animal G should be like, okay, now he has the wing membranes and it looks like a bat, but the bones are too solid still. They're not hollow like the bats have them. And so you should have this slow progression of the arms getting longer, the wing membrane forming. And you know how many animals they have found between the tree shrew and the bat?
I'm going to take a wild guess.
Yeah.
Just crazy guess, Dr. Werner.
Yeah.
Based on past experience and what you showed me, I'm going to go with a big fat goose egg on that.
Yeah, it's a goose egg for each of these intermediate steps. Goose egg for A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. And really that's being kind, really to be about 100 steps, okay?
Right, or more, yeah.
This does not look like evolution. And again, any person that's objective, once they see it, it's like, what the heck? So we could say then that the fossil record within the phyla generally, except for these best proofs, which we have to get to, generally shows that evolution did not occur. And these best proofs, which we're going to get to in a bit, stand out like a sore thumb and like, well, we better really look at these carefully because they don't look anything like we've seen before. And
so they're saying we do have evidence of it in some animals, which we're going to examine here in just a second. And because we see it here, we assume it happened in all of them, even though there's no evidence for all the others.
Yeah, and in fact, you could say, go down to the bottom right, because we have 8 men, that means that we know that the universe formed naturally. And we know that life had to begin naturally. And we know that the animals did evolve from a bacteria. See, they're using ape men, which I'm going to destroy here in a few minutes. They're going to use 8 men to validate that the origin of the universe did occur naturally. So the whole thing is going to rest here on the 3 best fossil proofs.
And this whole thing is a house of cards. I mean, you're pulling out, actually, it's a house of cards, and the cards don't really even exist. That's really the problem. They have zero. There's nothing there. Oh, okay, I can't wait to go on, but I've got to let social media go now. It's time for our break. Guys, on Facebook, Twitter, Rumble, X, I guess, where else are we on? TikTok and YouTube. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. I really would like you to get the rest of this conversation. If you can't do that, you can go watch our last show where we do go through many of the 8 men frauds. That's available at creationtoday.org. Look for breaking news. 150 frauds discovered in museums worldwide. It is an amazing conversation. You got to check that out. I would love for you to partner with us. All you do to come over to creationtoday.org, partner with us and help us reach the world with the gospel. And when you do that, you get access to everything we do. So if you care about our mission, if you want to reach the world with this kind of information, head over to creationtoday.org/partner. And then when you do that, you get access to not just the rest of this content, but everything we do. But we have a mission, and we're really trying to accomplish this and reach the entire world with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we'd love to have you on our team to help us do that. Dr. Werner, this is fantastic. All of this is in your books and on your DVDs. You guys can get those. They'll throw the link in the chat right now where you guys can grab those. It is fantastic resources. And the world needs to know. Scientists are waking up. I appreciate you always said it, what you said at the beginning with that quote from an evolutionist. Those ideas, the old ideas, have to die off. And they die when the people that hold them die. And so this may take a little bit of time, but evolution is definitely going downhill. Naturalism in 2024 is collapsing. And I'm so happy to see that. Hey, social media, join me next week at noon again. We've got a great show for you. Emil Zwane is the president of Living Waters. He just published a brand new book, and I can't wait to tell you what happened on social media whenever he published this book. But does purity matter in an impure world? And I'm telling you, this is going to get us right back to we are made in the image of God. He created us for a reason. And are we responsible and accountable to God? Are we recognizing that we are going to be held accountable to God for our purity? Does purity matter in an impure world? I'd love to see you next week as we discuss that with Emil Zwane. Until then, if you're not saved, I got a gift for you. Go to creationtoday.org/gift, GIFT, the best news you could ever hear. If you're a Christian out there on social media, share the gospel with somebody this week. Can't wait to see you more next week as we explore creation today.